let's see. One more question is from Lindsay Nordberg. So my dear friend Lindsay, thank you again for your kind gifts, and I hope you're doing well. And you asked me the question here. I'm curious at what point you decided to move from a casual collector into a more of a completionist. If there was a particular turning point, and if you can remember, or maybe these things happen more gradually. Okay, so that's a really great question, Lindsay. And I did talk about this very generally in a video I did some time back about how I got into Criterion, or something about my movie watching life and how it began, and a little bit of background about me. But I don't know if I spoke specifically about that moment when I decided to become a completionist, right? Completionist. And I think what happened was there was a time where there was an announcement made by Criterion, a few years back, several years back perhaps, about how some titles were going to become out of print. Do you remember that? So it was like Grand Illusion, Studio Canal titles. They were going to become out of print, so you better get them while you can. And that announcement really affected me. And it also was around that time, maybe a little bit after perhaps, that I was visiting New York. And I was already living in Japan at the time, so I was visiting New York, and I was visiting, I think, with my my wife, and my daughter was just born, so we were just having a little bit of vacation. And I remember walking around New York, and I forget the year exactly, but the Union Square. Because I used to live in a small apartment not so far from Union Square. And when I lived there many, many years ago, I would always go to the Strand bookstore, and I would always go to the Virgin Megastore. You remember that? And there's the huge Barnes & Noble on Union Square, of course. But then when I visited, after I'd moved back to Japan and I visited New York, the Virgin Megastore was no longer there. And also, while the Barnes & Noble Union Square store was there, I seem to recall that the number of bookstores in New York was decreased. The Strand was still there, so I was happy about that. But a number of other bookstores that I remember there being, they were no longer there. And so that seemed bit strange to me, and it was at that moment, I think, that I really became concerned. So around 2012, 2013 perhaps. That seems about right. Maybe 2013, that I decided that I should try to be more of a serious collector, because seeing all these things happen made me realize that physical media and maybe books and things like that they were probably things that could potentially go away. I don't know how true that has become now. It's 2018, but I'm sure you can appreciate or understand where my mind was at around that time. So I was really scared, to be perfectly honest. So I decided that I wanted to collect these things because I knew that there was the threat of some titles becoming OOP, and there are other things like that. And this also coincided with a number of elements that developed in my life. I started to get more of a disposable income, not so much, but perhaps just enough that I could start to collect these things with more gusto, so to speak. And also I was reaching a point where I knew that my access to films while I was in Japan, of the films that I used to watch when I was growing up, might be a little bit limited. And so I wanted to try anyway to get as many films as I could, and with the idea that I would try to keep them, and I could always look back upon them and watch them as I grew older. And so that was the whole plan. And so that turned into me wanting to focus on something, because I knew that I couldn't necessarily focus on many labels and everything, because I just don't have the money. So I decided then to create some boundaries in my collecting. And that was when I decided to stick with, let's say, the Criterion Collection. I mean, I say that, but the Criterion Collection, of course, is very vast. But I think you know what I mean, right? I just wanted to have those parameters. And so that meant that I was not focusing on other labels as they emerged. So maybe a few years down the line, you had titles or labels like Scream Factory, Shout Factory. And I do have some titles from them, but I don't have anything. I'm not near complete as other people are. Twilight Time I don't focus on. What is that? Plain Archive. Sorry, I don't have any of those. So, and that's just because I need to focus, and I need to be sure that I don't go. I'm not. My spending is controlled. So that's why I became a more serious collector, and that's why I decided to focus on Criterion. But by extension, what that meant also was that I was also trying to get into the Laserdiscs, because there came a point where that feeling of wanting to collect merged into a number of Laserdiscs that I had, through my father and through other places. And I bought one Laserdisc as a kind of souvenir, in a kind of a passing fancy. But I did have some Laserdisc, but I realized at a certain point that I wanted to collect those as well. So that's how my Laserdisc collecting began. And so that's why I ended up becoming a kind of a completionist, so to speak. And I'm glad I am, because it's nice to be able to recall some of these films and then pulling them off the shelf and watching them again, or at least with the new releases, being exposed to some films that I hadn't seen before. Obviously, there are so many of those. So it's really a wonderful thing to have this kind of library where I can pull things off and just go through the collection at my own leisure and pace. I do appreciate the fact, though, that Criterion isn't the be-all, end-all of cinema. I'm fully aware of that, and I'm fully aware of the fact that there are many, many, many great films in the world out there that are not under the Criterion label. So I know that in many ways it could be seen as a bit of maybe, for lack of a better phrase, a fool's errand, if I focus only on Criterion. And I perfectly appreciate that, and I admire that point. And I truly believe that, because I know that Criterion is not the be-all, end-all of cinema. And I'm sure people at Criterion also know this. But the reason why I think I am so enamored with Criterion, and that I put a lot of faith in the Criterion Collection, is I see it in a way like the Criterion Collection is curating films for me that the Criterion Collection is recommending that I see. So that's how I feel about the Criterion Collection. It is my own kind of curator, and it helps me to navigate the waters of cinema, without which I think I would be adrift and bereft of any direction. So that's how I view the Criterion Collection, as a very key component in my own continuing film education, my teacher and guidance, and also a curator of these great works of art. So it's just, and of course, a great example would be the upcoming Bergman box set. They are curating the particular order of the films. It's not necessarily chronological order, and so they are suggesting a certain way to watch these films in order to gain maximum appreciation. Well, that's the sort of thing that I really love Criterion for. Is this idea that they are helping me and other people like me to try to appreciate film in the best possible way. So Yeah, so that's how I feel. I think Criterion is wonderful in that way, and it is, has been, and continue to be, or it will continue to be, my teacher. So I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer to your question, Lindsay. I'm really sorry about that. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let me end it there. So, do you guys have any comments or responses that you want to make? You know, there are some really great questions here. So maybe if you have your own responses to your own or to any of these questions, please leave them below or leave your comments below, and I'll be very happy to address them. If you have any other questions for me as well, I'm very happy to address them to the best of my ability. Maybe if there are some questions that maybe I'm not so comfortable in answering, just please understand that, and I probably won't answer those. But anything else, I try to be as open as possible. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask anytime. Oh, yeah, I didn't prepare. And there's another great question that someone who asked to remain anonymous asked me, for example. This person asked me, what glasses do I have? You know, eyeglasses, because I have a number of eyeglasses, not just these. So maybe one of these days I can show you what other eyeglasses I wear. In fact, I do wear other frames than these. You know, I don't usually wear these for work. I wear other pairs of glasses for work, but I do wear these from time to time, and I like to wear them when I'm at home because they're my favorite pair of glasses, and they remind me of George Romero. I'm a big fan of George Romero, and this is sort of my little homage, or not homage, but my dedication to him, because he gave me so many great memories, cinematic memories as a child. So I feel like this is just my ode to George, so to speak. And I wear these whenever I'm at home, and as a result, whenever I make these videos. But I do have other pairs of glasses, so maybe one day I will show them off, and you can see just how terrible I look. I look pretty bad with these glasses, I know, but there are some other pairs of glasses that I look pretty bad in, so it's maybe a little bit embarrassing for me. But maybe one of these days I can show you what I look like in other pairs of glasses. But thank you very much for your interest and curiosity about my eyewear. Anyway, so let me leave it at that, and I hope all of you are well, and please keep watching a lot of great films. If you have any recommendations or suggestions for great films to watch, I would love to hear that, and maybe we can go from there. Okay, my friends, until we meet again, cheers.